and food service markets. Welcome to today's webinar. We're looking beyond COVID and to the next normal. It's probably an understatement to say that we live in uncertain times, but 3 meals a day, 7 days a week means that there's ultimately a relatively strong market and demand for the products that farmers and the industry provides. But that doesn't mean that what we eat and where we eat stands still. Doesn't mean that our customer base stays the same. It doesn't mean that competition doesn't shift either. I'm conscious that farming is an industry where we tend to take a bit of a wait and see approach, particularly when we're dealing with some relatively long production cycles. I get that. When a storm approaches, batten down the hatches, wait for things to return to normal seems like a sensible strategy. But my view is that the changes that are coming aren't a blip. They won't just pass over. It's all about how we adapt. Riding out the storm doesn't feel like the best approach in this instance. I'm really looking forward to the next hour or so with Dr. David Hughes, getting his take on the changes that are heading our way and what it means for our industry. We'll have some opportunity for questions and answers later on as well. But before that, first a bit of housekeeping. Now, all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. As I mentioned, we'll have a formal question period at the end, but please feel free to ask questions throughout. You can do that by opening the questions panel, which should be shown on the right-hand side of the screen. You can also use this to raise any technical issues that you're experiencing with the webinar. We're planning on finishing at 5 p.m. We're also going to record this and it will be published on YouTube and on the AHDB website if you want to revisit any of the content. You'll be prompted to answer a survey at the end of the webinar. Please take the time to complete this. That all helps us at AHDB understand how we can improve the webinars that we run. So look, over to our speaker. I'm not going to give a big introduction because I know he's the reason that so many of you have called in today and that this webinar has proved popular. Now, in normal times, David travels around the world giving his perspective on the global food industry, the developments that are taking place and how they're going to affect businesses and industry. Now, David's still zooming around the world today, albeit from his home in Monmouth, but I'm really delighted that he's been able to join us for this session today. So I'll mute myself and hand over to David.
Hello there. Hi. Hope you can hear me, and because I can hear me, but I can't see you. But it is what it is, and I've got a lot to get through, so I better get cracking. Excuse me, I'm not Mr. High Tech. So post-COVID and the next normal, challenges and opportunities for animal agriculture. Bear with me if I sort of ramble quickly, because I want to sort of rush through it so we've got an opportunity to take some questions. Okie doke, off I go. Number of people in our world. I always like to start with that question just to really remind us that we're 7.8 billion people in the world. We're a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that, way less than 1% of total. But always intrigues me that something like 75% of our world by population is either Asian or African. And if we sort of fast forward 30 years, we're going to add another 2 billion people. And what's more, the share of the world population that is Asian and African will increase to 80% or nigh on. And that's largely because of the doubling of the population of Africa. I'm very pro-Africa. I worked in Africa for 5 years. But I often wonder, is that a great food marketing opportunity, the doubling of the population, or is it a social problem? And I guess we're going to find out. Okay, the first series of slides really relate to COVID because you've got to set the scene. So, and what a scene it is. Here we go. Front page of the papers was it yesterday, and it made sort of pretty grisly reading. Millions more face toughest COVID curbs. I love the Matt cartoon. Economic data is ranked in 3 tiers: appalling, ghastly, and apocalyptic. But if I went back to March, just when we realized what we were getting into, we had a sort of naive view, really, that there were two principal scenarios. One was the V shape, that we would be down in the dumps but recover quickly. And we thought, well, maybe not. Maybe it would be W-shaped. So W in that there would be a second peak, which clearly we're experiencing at the moment. And my view has been consistently, actually, that it's more likely to be a W with hiccups, that we might see a series of hopefully increasingly small little ups and downs. And I'm down below that is what the expert, HSBC in this particular case, view is what will happen to our economy if we don't get a deal for Brexit. And what it shows is that it exacerbates what would anyway be a particularly ghastly deal. And so one way or another, I think we're all got a big bet on V for vaccine, and hopefully too a bet that we will get some deal come the end of this month. Moving on. Okay, look, I don't want to be too ghoulish, but I think I'm always sort of interested, how has everybody else around the world handled or experienced, if you will, COVID-19? Because it's been quite different in various countries. And I've just put a selection here. Let's look on the right-hand side. Japan, population 126 million. How many deaths? About 1,500. If you contrast that, say, with ourselves on the left-hand side, here we are, half the population and 43,000 deaths. Australia, and they consider they've got a real economic problem associated with COVID-19, less than 1,000 deaths. What about in the middle there, Vietnam, a country where I've done lots of work in the past? It's close on 100 million people. They've had 35 deaths. I mean, they haven't had an issue. They'll be eating out. And that's my point, I guess. If you look at the various experiences that various countries have had, it will determine their behavior as we move out, hopefully, as we move out of COVID. Not least, for example, in relation to shopping or eating out. And so in Vietnam, why wouldn't you eat out on the street? Why wouldn't you just have a normal day? I think it'll just take us a little more time. Again, on the left-hand side are the underperformers, if you will. And you can see there, in terms of ghoulish though it is, deaths per million, we're at 640, US at 650, Spain at 700 deaths per million. And contrast that with other countries, particularly in Asia, and they tend to be 10 or less, quite a different experience. And the other thing that I think we've got to just sort of give a few moments to is, okay, we know we've got a problem. We know we've been hit in terms of income, but how quickly will we recover? And what this story is that it depends on the country. And from a UK point of view, that first of all, this year, 2020, we will probably see one of the biggest declines in GDP of any of the major countries. And secondly, for us to get out of the current mess that we're in is probably going to take us a couple of years at least. So Q4 23 is when we might be back in the same position economically from a GDP point of view as we were in 2019. Whereas, say, China and Indonesia, two countries and big countries they both are, will not go into recession. They will experience, as they say, low growth, which means the same growth as we've been having pre-COVID, so 2%, something like that. So we've got a wait before households start to see the same level of income washing through their households post-COVID. And that's 2 or 3 years. And I think there's all sorts of implications for the food industry. I say here, without being just try to get a little bit of humor, best take the advice of a 20th century philosopher. In my particular case, I like Yogi Berra, who was the catcher for the New York Yankees. What did he say? It ain't over till it's over. And that was ever thus, I tell you. But if we look at COVID since our lockdown and all the way through over the last 7 months, whatever it is, some people have done well and some have done badly. And so it's an ill wind that blows no one any good. Actually, major retailers have had a pretty good time. Why? Because, of course, they got all the market. We closed down food service and major retailers took everything. Actually, so big retailers did well, and so did big food. Big food are those big food companies which were suffering 2017, 18, and into 19 because their products were seen to be old-fashioned, not in tune with particularly millennial consumers' wants and wishes. But when we got into lockdown, suddenly their products were back and we've been bought in large numbers. So large supermarkets, large manufacturers done well. And what did we all do? It's sort of intriguing for me. I mean, under normal conditions in a year, I might go to, say, I don't know, 15, 20 countries. And actually, our sort of hoarding behavior was very similar right across the world. What did we rush out to buy? Comfort foods, old favorites, storables, indulgent snacks, staples, and value price protein. In the UK, for example, we ran out of mince very, very quickly. If we moved across to, say, Asia, spam. Who are the big spam eaters? The Filipinos are great spam eaters, and they were hoarding it, as were the Koreans. And of course, they would focus on rice and noodles. We were trying to buy bread, not least flour, of course, and then there's the toilet paper thing, don't even talk about it. So moving on, at retail, how did meat do? We're talking about animal protein at the moment. Well, actually, as the grocer, the trade magazine said last week, that lockdown meat fest, fresh meat and poultry, going up by 7% year on year. What did that mean? Actually, it was lockdown retail meat fest because it was at the expense of food service. So supermarkets were just selling more product because we weren't eating out. And how did our shopping change? Well, we all know. It was suddenly it was online. Was this a UK thing? Not at all. Right across the globe. Doesn't matter where I look. The US just zoomed ahead. Ocado, that's operating both in the US and the UK, just did fabulously well. Malaysia, demand overwhelms grocery delivery services there. Australia, which was a slow starter, saw online just surging. But who else did well at retail? Actually, pre and post and during COVID-19, there's been strong international growth in local, smaller stores. We suddenly found that local community had a role in our lives, whether it was the local store on the end or, say a chain. Around the world, for example, 7-Eleven stores have done astonishingly well. And in the UK, we could just pop out and buy the odd thing that we were just running out of. Big shop in the supermarket, small shop in the local shop, or indeed going to the butcher and the greengrocer who hadn't seen for years. What about hard discounters in the UK and in general? Actually, initially they struggled through the lockdown. Why? Because, of course, in most cases, they didn't have a good online offer. They sort of picked up a little. But I think post-COVID, you're going to see a real move by hard discounters. I've taken the example of Aldi here. Remember Aldi, which is a German hard discounter. It plays an important role in the UK with what, 7-8% grocery market share, but it's everywhere I go, establishing itself in China now. So why are they important? Why is a hard discounter important? Because it brings price pressure on retail prices. So, for example, during the lockdown, we as a family have been fed by Tesco. Thank you very much, Tesco Online. And if I go to Tesco Online this week, what do I see? That Tesco, to try and keep some sort of price positioning, is Aldi price matching on a few hundred items, which are KVIs, key value items. And so I've taken the example here of Tesco 0% fat Greek style yogurt. It Aldi price matches. It's 39p. 39p for 500 grams. It's virtually a free good. And I think it really makes the point about how that Aldi can just keep on that price pressure, and it will continue to do so. But just go to the far right there and look at total 0% fat Greek yogurt, and it's Fage, the Fage Total, the Greek yogurt. It's 7 times the retail price of Tesco's Aldi price match. Just for me, it underlines the power of branding, but how hard discounters can force prices down. Suppliers don't particularly like that. And it was brought home to me last week, again, looking at my comic, The Grocer. The Grocer does a price match every week and does not include, in general, hard discounters, but they had a guest retailer, which was Lidl last week. Lidl wins hands down when they compare the prices of 33 basket items with all the other major supermarkets, beating Asda, that was number 2, by a full 12%. And if you are high income enough to go to Waitrose, then you're paying an extra 54% to shop there. What's important about that? Well, I think the importance is, look at that graph on the right-hand side. It's US data. But it's about who's done how by income level in the US. And what it shows is that high wage workers, yes, they saw an income dip, but they've recovered rather quicker than low wage workers. I think that's exactly the same in the UK. What does that mean? It means that there is a slug, a big segment of households, of shoppers, who are looking for real deals at grocery because they're absolutely income challenged. And again, that's going to keep the hammer down on retail prices, and that will be reflected in prices received by suppliers, I'm afraid to say. And I don't think it's helped. I was interested to see Asda being sold to the petrol station, gas station billionaires, but I think that's more likely than not to take a further hard discount route from any other strategy. So as I look to the period from which we will be trying to claw our way out of COVID-19, I think it's going to be heavy duty, hard discount, and it's about savvy shoppers, and we will feel that. And for me, I was just looking at some Rabobank data, actually related to China. And this graph shows, well, this figure shows the very good Chen Junpan, who is the meat analyst for Rabo in China, which is saying how the market for meat in China has moved over the last 5 years from a great big mass market into something more fragmented, with at the top end consumers willing to pay premium for high quality healthy foods. And then there's another segment, middle to high premiumization, with a smaller mass market, and then down the bottom, insecure income, people who are trading down, and then lower end, very price sensitive people. I think that 2020 right-hand side is a great picture of what it's like right now in the UK. And because the proportion of households that will be really income constrained is high, that will force big supermarkets to keep on just pushing low prices. Moving on. However, look, there's a happy side. Not everything will be depremiumized. What about puppies? Rising puppy prices all the way through. If you're livestock people, if you've got any livestock with dog names, and particularly if they're varieties with 2 U's in their name, then you're on the way to making money. The prices of cockapoos, cavapoos, labradoodles, for example, doubled, more than doubled in a very short period. Now it's $3 grand plus if you want to buy some of these little darlings. So what, from a livestock sector and a meat industry point of view, it does a lot of good if you happen to be in premium pet food, I would suggest. And you know, that's not just trying to be humorous. Okay, so what's happened? Home became the hub, and it still is actually. It's for living and working. Is it more home cooking? Well, we certainly indulged in snacking. I think most people's meal repertoires did extend, but actually it wasn't cooking like mum used to, although we did bake. It was more about convenience cooking. So convenient to buy, prepare, to consume and dispose of. We all said that we would eat much more healthily, but actually when you look at the data, what did we do? We bought more flour. That was because suddenly it was necessary to make sourdough. Most of us couldn't spell it before. But what did we eat a lot more of? Eggs, bacon, sausages. It was the full fry breakfast that became a big deal. Who did badly as we moved through? Well, of course we know it was food service. And here we are going back to May. Can Europe's restaurants survive the coronavirus lockdown? I'm right into this as I'm a co-owner with my youngest son of 2 restaurants in North Devon. And we struggled, but actually July, August, September, and in part the eat out to help out was a big plus for us. But from a farmer point of view, there was problems here, clear problems, in that as we closed all those restaurants, those who were in supply chains that focus specifically on on food service were hurt. And that actually, I mean, I missed that when I sort of opened up here. Actually, when it comes to COVID-19 overall, that the agricultural industry in general has had a better time of it than most sectors, I would suggest, apart from those who particularly were in the food service business. Although I do understand that from a meat point of view, there's been issues in meat plants, and also from a farm labor point of view, there were COVID-19 related problems. So food service, no, it's been difficult. And it's so intriguing. If I look at what happens in the UK, that actually we have a predilection in the UK to work from home if given the option, much more than any other country in Europe. I think that's got something to do with the fact that actually we are longer term commuters than most, and we were quite pleased to get rid of that commuting burden. But I was taken, this was an Economist little article showing that in Britain that there were more of us staying at home to work, and that the headquarters of the Economist in London, right downtown, within 5 minutes walk of the Economist, there are 5 Pretz, 2 Itsus, a Wasabi, a McDonald's, a Five Guys, a Leon's, and they're largely empty. They've been devastated. So is that sort of bye-bye food service? You know, is it bye-bye restaurant? Will they just not recover? I mean, what is intriguing is the acceleration of the trend that we've seen in food service of eating out in. That is, it's about restaurant meal delivery. And this was happening prior to COVID, but this pandemic has just accelerated this. And what we're seeing in the UK and in the US and in China and in major markets is increasing concentration in the restaurant meal delivery sector. There are few companies that really have all the clout here, whether it be Deliveroo or Just Eat or DoorDash in the US. They're extraordinarily powerful, and their market cap just makes your eyes water. But it's sort of interesting from a food industry point of view because they've become major customers, I would suggest. So will the coronavirus pandemic, will it make us all germaphobes? Well, certainly we're more concerned about food safety. And it's given us more interest in local food because it somehow seems safer. We want contactless payment. We want contactless almost everything. And it'd be intriguing to see as we move back into a more normal existence, whether the buffets will exist or will it be bye-bye British buffets? We don't want anything anybody's been anywhere near. I think from a food industry point of view too, COVID in food plants is a clear and present danger, not least for the frozen food exporters. If I look around the world, what do I see? That increasingly major customers starting in China are saying that they don't want product that comes from countries that have a severe coronavirus problem. Why? Because there's a belief, a perception that in fact the virus can linger on frozen food products in particular for weeks. And so the meat industry globally from an export point of view, I think has been hurt. Moving on, and it's also been hurt because of this perception that it's a virus which is zoonotic, so transferred from animals to humans, and it can happen again. I think we're going to have to carry this, we're going to have to defend against this going forward from a particularly intensive livestock industry perspective. This is a very unlikely David Hughes type slide, but I just sat down one day and said, I wonder if I can split everything into how we work, how we shop, how we watch, how we play, how we travel, how we heal, how we learn, and how we trade, and then work out what's the COVID impact. I haven't time to get into the detail, but if we say how we shop, more, it's all about more and less, more online, more local, more trusted brands, less use of shopping malls, less income, less premium products for some. How do we heal? How do we look after ourselves? More interest in managing family health with diet and exercise, more fresh, more natural foods, more government regulations on health. So huge implications. Just quickly on Brexit, I'm hardly missed the Brexit or the, but it intrigues me if we look at what degree of self-sufficiency in food do we have in the UK? I mean, actually trying to tie down a specific number is very difficult. DEFRA tells me that it's 55%. if I have a look at the food strategy phase 1, was it Henry Dimbleby? He was talking about 64%, something like that. But the fact of the matter is that we're a major importer of food. Where does most of it come from? Comes from the EU. And I would suggest, where's our best market? At home. And we've got room to grow here. And what's our next best market? Just across the Channel and the Irish Sea. And particularly if I take meat, focusing on meat for the moment, that it's this, over the last 40 or 50 years, it's been this development of trade, our exports to the EU, their exports back to us, if you will. And I rather think that animals UK will be more adversely affected by a no-deal Brexit than plants UK. Although my temptation is to think, I'm ever optimistic that we will grind our way to some sort of deal. Moving on. Because look, if I look at exporting, if suddenly we're cut off, so to speak, or if we can only enter the EU on WTO terms and are trading around the world on similar, it's tough to try and expand that export business from a relatively small start. And wherever I go, I just look at major players who've been there for decades and they're so well developed. For example, in dairy, if I look at Friesland Campina in Asia, they've been there for years. They were the colonial masters, if you will, 100 years ago, and they have such strength right across Asia with their branded products. Can we do this? Yes, we can. Cheekily, I put in the new chairman of AHDB, ex-chairman of OMSCO, and OMSCO developed, a strong export market for organic milk, but it just takes time, not something you just turn a switch and it's on. And this quickly, maybe more controversially, British agriculture is the best standards in the world. I hear that every day. Do I believe it? Well, to a degree, but I think globally, the green bar is being raised all over the world. And one result of us being firm on food standards, particularly the standards that aren't necessarily accepted by WTO, is that trade deals may be difficult to come by. That doesn't mean one should compromise, but it will favor the UK in terms of moving towards more self-sufficiency. And I think that's likely. If we don't get a deal, then I think it's our big market is our home market, and we'll end up just being more self-sufficient. Is that a good thing? Well, who knows? You'll tell me. Okay, quickly, because I've, have to, the world of protein. Really, I'm talking to livestock people here in the protein business. What do I notice? I mean, it's good news that the protein market globally is growing and growing at pace right across the world. Actually, the largest part of protein is plant-based protein, and but that's also the slowest growth. Meat, eggs, and dairy are in very healthy growth. That must be good. And if I look at livestock, then I think immediately you've got to look at chicken, because chicken has been the massive long-term disruptor in the global meat industry, frankly. I've just used a US example here. You can see per capita consumption racing past all other meats. Why? Because we use it for every occasion. I was in Canada just before lockdown, and here's McDonald's saying, chicken for breakfast. Yes, please. If you're looking to grow your market, add another eating occasion, I'd say. But why is chicken so successful? Because consumers have got a great long list of positives about it. It's affordable, it's versatile, snackable, it's eat hot and cold, the kids like it, it's available everywhere. They have consumer-orientated products like nuggets. It's religious neutral. Those are the consumer checklists. It's also, people now look at the citizen checklist. Is it climate friendly, environmentally friendly, sustainable, animal welfare friendly, human health friendly? And actually, eco-active consumers increasingly are modifying their food purchases on the basis of these citizen issues. Chicken's got an ambivalent position on citizen checklists, but mind you, so do other meats and dairy. So that leads me into what's been happening in plant-based meats. And my word, this isn't just a little sort of tick. It is a tsunami. If I look at Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, the two companies that are in plant-based meats that get most of the media attention, they've taken $2 billion $2 billion worth of venture capital out of the market in the last 12 months. It's astonishing. If they fail, it's not going to be because of lack of finance. It might be because of lack of taste and texture, but let's see. But it's just growing and growing at pace. Starbucks adding impossible breakfast sandwiches to its menu. I see this everywhere. Here's A.T. Kearney saying by 2040 that plant-based meat may have 25% of the total meat market, including non-meat meat, if you will, and that conventional meat may be as little as 40% of the total market. Do I believe that? No, but I do know that cell-cultured meat and plant-based meat will have their place in our market by 2030, and it will be well into double figures. You can see the big players. Big food has been just whopping into it. Here's Kellogg's, you know, the cereal, the breakfast guys with the incognito plant-based burgers. Nestle, the largest food company in the world, and they're using plant-based foods as a springboard to expand sales, whether it be, and even into fish, sensational Vuna. So that's plant-based tuna, if you will. And I see this everywhere I go. China, right across Asia. Here's KFC with Cargill in China with its, when the, you know something's going on when the Colonel gets into plant-based nuggets, for goodness sake. And here we are in Singapore with jackfruit. Some of you will know jackfruit. It mimics pork if you add a really spicy sauce really, really well. Brilliant. And what about corn? It's a seriously profitable fake meat brand. It used to be British. Of course, it's now owned by Monde Nissin of the Philippines. It makes operating profits of more than 20% year in, year out. Way, way more profitable than big meat companies. And I haven't even the time to talk about cultured meat, but it will have its place in the market. How long before it gets commercial? Probably 6-8 years, but it will be there. And I'd be careful too of growing leather from cells too. Modern meadow is doing that. It will have its place, and it can do damage to the livestock and meat industry overall. And what worries me, but at the same time, you've got to applaud them. If you look at the major players in plant-based meats, here's Unilever with its vegetarian butcher. They're so consumer focused. What the cluck, little peckers. You know, it's all a bit sort of naughty, schoolboyish. What have we got here? Little Willies. You know, it's all fun stuff, but it's sort of consumer driven. It's not supply push. And I think often in red meat products in particular, we've been production led and driven by supply push. Wrong way round. What about, haven't mentioned dairy? Well, look, you know, do we need to go out and cut our throats? Because if you look at fluid milk consumption on a per capita basis, both in the UK and the US, it's fallen by 50% over the last 40 years or so. Oh my Lord. But actually, if you get to the detail, let's take the US, that actually total dairy product consumption per capita has grown by over 20% in the US. And I think it's doing the same in the UK. In the US, it's related particularly to cheese and yogurt, fluid milk and ice cream going backwards, but cheese, yogurt and butter just storming ahead. So it's positive. And we're very capable of coming out with strongly consumer-focused products. Lactalis Nestle here with their new high-protein dairy range, and Chobani, who've done a brilliant job in the US with their advanced nutrition yogurt. I mean, spot on from a consumer health and well-being point of view. This sort of gut and immune system, low sugar, no lactose, high protein, and bringing adventure and excitement to high-value dairy. But we've got problems too here, not problems, but challenges. I was looking, it was 2 weeks ago now, the Future of Dairy Industry 2030, a study put out by Tetra Pak, who are big into dairy, of course, because of their packaging and milk, and Lund University from Sweden. And here it's a scenario scene where they've taken dairy evolution, green dairy, new fusion, and brave new food as 4 scenarios, with increasing impact of non-dairy dairy. So, for example, dairy evolution in 2030, they envisage cow-based milk being 85% of the dairy industry, and lab and plant making the rest. But if we move to brave new food, which is a scenario where you expect to see fast-growing technology and huge pressure, socio-environmental pressure for consumers, where you could see cow-based drift down to as little as 20%. Now, are they saying that any one of these will happen? No, it could be some meld, but I think we really have to look at this and say, you know, what do we think might happen? Because what is happening out there is, so, you know, it's intriguing, and just like plant-based meats, it's real. Here's, I mean, we'll never forgive him. Hard man Vinnie Jones. Do you remember May 2012, like 8 years ago? He was the front face on, you know what's good for you, make mine milk. And then, damn him, 8 years later, you know what's good for you, make yours oat. Yeah, my Lord. And if I look at, there's lots of horsepower in oats. So big food is piling in. Here's Alpro, which is Danone with its daily immunity support super oat drink. Activia, which is Danone again, with oat yogurts. Carnation, there's nothing more traditional than canned carnation milk made with oats. Here we've got Mars, Bounty, and Galaxy milkshakes, except it's made with oats. And goodness me, dairy-free, the great, I think it's the great grandson of John Cadbury has just launched oat milk chocolate range called Happiness in Plants. As I say, John Cadbury would be revolving in his grave. What's the driver here? There is consumer concerns about the environment, also of animal welfare, but let's focus on the environment for the moment. That I'll buy much more green, sustainable products. Better part of 40% of Brits say that's what they want to do. What's this been driven by? All sorts of things. I mean, this is pre-COVID and it's going to be post-COVID. We all know the young woman on the right with the yellow anorak on. That's Greta, who's hugely influential. She can be bloody irritating, but she's certainly influential. And this sort of drive by younger people that we need to change the way we treat the planet, and we can do that through climate-friendly and planet-friendly diets, that has real traction. And they're supported by the UN, for example, and indeed by our own governments. You know, that's real pressure. And I know this really annoys the livestock and meat and dairy parts of the world, but we see these sort of research reports that come out where if you're in orange, then that's acceptable. If you're in red, it's going to kill you. And of course, it's unprocessed red meat. It's processed red meat that's going to kill you. It's all about nuts, potatoes, veg, fruit, legumes, olive oil, etc. That pressure is building, and it will have an impact on consumption. And this sort of concerns me too, that it was just in the Financial Times the other day, climate campaigners are turning their focus from fossil fuels to meat because they believe they've won the fossil fuel argument, and they're saying we're going to put the same pressure on meat. Watch it. And what's more, even dear Tesco, God love them, that with their 300% rise in vegan meat sales, because they believe there's demand for it, but what are they saying? Tesco said meat and dairy production has a significant impact on environments such as the Amazon and Cerrado regions of Brazil, and it's acknowledged as a major contributor to climate change. So they're pushing to be seen as a more sustainable company. Looking again, I'm back to oats now, but no, here we go. What we're going to see within 2 years, I'm for sure, either because of consumer push or because of regulation, but probably because of both, is that we will see Enviro scores on all food products. And I wonder, what's the Enviro score going to be for your product, whether it be Welsh lamb or fluid milk or cheese or steak. Look, it's already happening. Here's Oatly from Sweden with its footprint on corn, with telling you what's the carbon impact. It's happening right now. And last week, I was just looking through my trade papers again. Here's Brewdog, the UK's best-selling craft beer, carbon negative. Here's Barilla, one of the great pasta manufacturers of the world from Italy, where the attribute that it's highlighting is the container, the package that its pasta is in. It's not plastic, you can recycle it. And Weetabix on the right-hand side say, if it's not grown within 50 miles of here, it doesn't go in the pack. It's about the environment. And Big Meat is getting into this big time too. Here's Cargill, Burger King, working with WWF to mitigate the effects of climate change with a new grassland restoration project. And actually, the two biggest meat companies in the world, which are Marfrig and JBS, late in the day are just starting to embrace the sustainability agenda. Okay, racing on here. Sorry if it's too fast. That as we've gone through COVID in particular, although it was relevant pre, consumers increasingly want to know, where does my food come from? How was it produced? Origin gives them reassurance of quality and safety. They want to know the story. I think we're quite good in the UK at telling the story, but we need to be better at it. And I put this in a meat example. How do you like your meat? Well, I'd like mine with adjectives, please. How do you mean by that? Well, I'd like it free range, grass fed, Farmer Jill's, Surrey Farm, Aberdeen Angus, rare breed, omega-3 rich, happy, dry age, bird friendly, whatever it may be. Give me the adjectives, because that's where the margin is. There isn't a big margin in nouns, and beef is a noun, lamb is a noun, pork is a noun. Go for the adjectives. You can see it wherever you look. I was taken by this Austrian ad for 100% mountain farmer hay milk makes the difference. Brilliant. Or this one is my old favorite here, Waitrose, free range air dried beach smoked back bacon. I say, Waitrose, wouldn't they only use college educated pigs for their premium bacon. It's free range, air dried, beechwood smoked, hand cured in Suffolk. The margin is in the adjectives. Yes, some of us are good at telling stories. We all need to improve. Rachel's and Yovale, I think, are pretty good at it. And there's my quick example. And what we see more and more and more of is social pressure building, which dictates the choice of food. Remind me again what we can't eat. Anything with palm oil, chicken that's been fed soy from Brazil, eggs from chicken in cages, milk from zero grazed cows, beef that's destroyed the Amazon, pork from pigs confined in stores. And I think post-COVID, we've got to work out what are the major social issues which will disturb growth in the UK livestock, meat and dairy sectors. I think there's more social pressure to come for dairy. Happy to talk about that again. And actually, that pressure can sometimes bring opportunity. This was just a couple of months ago. So WWF and RSPB had a big consumer advert saying supermarket pork at risk of fueling deforestation because of the soy in pig feed from Brazil. And I was interested this week, or was it last week, UK retailer M&S swaps soy feed in milk supply chain with high performing alternatives, where it's switching from soy, or the farmers are switching from soy in the livestock feed, in the dairy feed, using instead rapeseed and sugar beet. On the right hand side is just an example of Barilla, the pasta guys who are also big in biscuits, who will not use palm oil in any of their products. And again, it's, look at the other side of the coin. That's pretty good for rapeseed guys, I would suggest. Almost done now. Look, what I see in big food, and big food is the Unilevers and the Danones that I've mentioned, is increasingly they are changing the way they do business, because activist consumers are saying to them, whose side are you on? What do you stand for? What's your purpose? Danone, for example, has just become a entreprise à mission. It's a company whose purpose and objectives in social and environmental feeds is set out in their articles of association, where their performance is measured every year by an independent auditor on consumer health and nutrition, water, ag, biodiversity, packaging, social innovation, etc. Unilever doing very, very similar things. They're hugely influential. And this sort of intrigues me, because big food have got on to the notion of regenerative agriculture. And say, when we get measured, our carbon impact is measured, it will be for the entire supply chain, all the way back to the farm. So suddenly, big food is increasingly and very interested in agriculture. Here we've got Danone and DSM with the Alliance Farming for Generations, that working how can we improve our supply chains. It's Cargill last month just announced that they were joining the Regen Ag, as the Americans would say, setting goals for 10 million acres of cropping land where they use the commodities as raw materials. General Mills doing exactly the same. So big food is turning to regenerative agriculture to meet sustainability goals and to satisfy their concerned stakeholders. I think that has huge implications for farmers, and it presents a great opportunity for farmers. So I didn't know if I had time for a summary, but I'll just put in what I think. Look, what is the outlook for the decade? I think it is a mega challenging decade for UK animal sector. You shall, as you always have, prevail. But by decade end, the world of protein, I think, will have changed sort of irreversibly. Talk to your children. They'll tell you they know. At home, I think it'll be a hard grind as household incomes claw their way back to pre-COVID levels. And retailers are going to be scrapping for market share with themselves, but to other faster growing routes to the consumer. You keep an eye on those faster growing routes because the relative importance of supermarkets is declining. Global demand, hooray, for livestock and dairy products is increasing substantially, but it's driven by emerging markets. I think there will be a Brexit trade deal and it will get done, to be Boris about it. And that the EU-UK trading patterns for food going forward will be similar to the past, which I think is a good thing. I think trade deals with the US and other countries will be constrained by disagreements on food standards. But remember, UK food standards, they're good, but the green bar is rising right across the world. So, you know, if we're good, there are others coming up on the right-hand side. At home, meat and dairy sales will increase because of population growth, but their share of the overall protein pie will decrease because of other sources of protein. Customers and consumers are positive about British food, but I think I've got a phrase. I think we've got to get the flexitarians on side. What is quite clear is that consumers are very happy, particularly millennial, younger consumers are very happy having dairy and non-dairy dairy, and they like them both together. And we have to get them on our side to explain the attributes associated with the real things, but they will continue to be flexitarians. We'll get increased pressure from consumers, customers, and governments on environmental, animal welfare, and health issues. We know that, and expect more consumer pressure and regulation on environmental impact of livestock production. What I haven't had time to mention, but just en passant, if you will, is I think world meat prices will be supported to a degree for the next 3 years because of ASF impact and the fact that in China, they still have this 20 million ton hole in meat supply in their own country. Sorry to race through, but I hope we've got some time. We have a little bit of time for questions, and I hope I haven't been talking to an empty screen. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, David. That was fantastic. You covered an awful lot of ground in a relatively short period of time. We're gonna open up to questions in a moment, but we've also got a poll as well. So hopefully that will appear on a screen in a second. But we're kind of keen to get views from those of you that have been watching and listening in terms of some of the big challenges big themes that you think we're facing. But look, I'm going to jump to the questions, and one of the first ones was that, and there's a poll just appeared on your screen. So grateful if you can select the one that gives you the biggest concern or biggest question marks. David, just to jump to questions a moment. I suppose the Brexit related question was something you kind of touched on and raced through. And I suppose your confidence about there being a deal done at some point. But I suppose one of the tensions that was flagged by one of the viewers was around actually if there isn't a deal, then there's potentially tariffs, and what does that mean in terms of rising prices for consumers? Because that's where it feels like government has got a big challenge on its hands.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So if there was no Brexit, I just said briefly, because there just wasn't enough time. I think if there's no Brexit, then it has a disproportionately negative impact on the livestock sector, and in particular, actually, I was thinking of lamb because that's in terms of the proportion of the total supply that we actually export. But yeah, if there was no deal and we were on WTO terms and the tariff levels are high, then that would be higher prices and that would hurt everybody because you'd have you've answered the question really. You've got stressed consumers who would then have to pay more, and there would be trading down. And as I said, not everybody, but I put a slide up early showing that income-constrained proportion of households has grown and will continue to grow over the next 3-6 months. So there will be a dangerously high proportion of people who will be looking for deals. And if they were suddenly faced with fresh produce with a 20% tariff on it, then they'd be outraged, frankly. I mean, I don't know how you'd even handle that politically. And I'm sure that must be part of the thinking. Say, can we afford politically to take this decision when we know, when the so-called experts also tell us that we will just make a bad situation worse if we don't do a trade deal? So, I mean, I know you've got to have plan B, but I just think there must be a plan A of one sort or another. What's most likely to happen, as ever, is they'll just push it out a little bit again, saying, actually, we were going to take a decision then, but now we're going to add another 3 months and then another 3 months. But it would be diabolical if we were straight into full world-scale tariffs.
Yeah, I guess that's a compulsion to get it done, as it were, to coin a phrase. I was really interested in what you said about the kind of the meat and using adjectives. And I suppose that kind of then gets me, when you were talking about some of the plant-based foods, one of the things that makes them stand out is the proliferation of branding, the marketing that goes behind it. And I compare that to the lack of branding when I go down the red meat aisle. I just wonder what your take is. Do you see that as being something that will develop in the next 2-3 years?
Yes, and I mean, I see it globally that the big guys are just starting to get into the branding of meat. They don't necessarily do it well because it's not part of their DNA. Those major international meat firms, they've been, as I said, supply driven, supply push.
Yeah. So the processors, not marketeers.
And no, that's right. How quickly can we get the product through the plant? And what their business has been about is being capacity utilization. And they're very quick when I talk to them, say, David, we haven't got the margin to invest in marketing like some of the big FMCG companies. They say, that's because, of course you haven't, because you've been commodity orientated, and almost by definition the margin is smaller. But I'm starting to see markets fragment. I think that's good, with just different segment for different people requiring which I say big players don't like, because then it's more fiddly for them. It gives opportunities for smaller operators who are just quicker on their feet. But I see examples all around the world. When I'm in Australia, there's in Tasmania, there's a lovely company called Cape Grim, and you think, wow, can you imagine calling it Cape Grim beef? Hugely successful, and they sort of build on the wildness of the southern Tasmanian coast and build this sort of story about supernatural, if you will, wild beef, selling into high value markets in Australia, in Singapore, just all over. And there are real opportunities here, but you have to start from the right point. And unfortunately, the Unilevers of this world, that is in their DNA. That's what they know. And we don't fetch.
So picking up on that, and I suppose one of the things that when I put my farming hat on, I suppose I start thinking about the marketing and positioning that certainly goes in some of the plant-based aspects, and particularly when I think about actually I suppose it's the sustainability and the environmental impact. And we've had a couple of questions that touch on these themes. that one as a farmer, how do I compete in terms of some of that sustainability message where maybe the companies are being selective in terms of their messaging. The other bit is, what about the consumer understanding of sustainability? Because it means different things to different people. How do we navigate that?
Yeah, well, and you're quite right. It does. It's just sort of amorphous green, and I don't know. It's a real. Although I think their understanding change improves through time, but there were sort of sub questions in what you've asked me from a sort of farming point of view. Where, particularly if you're in livestock, where that there are issues relating to the environment, also to animal welfare, for example, that actually, it's my opinion that consumers are sympathetic if they know you recognize there's a problem and that you're on a journey to improve it. And they want to be part of that journey. They want to, and they'll be with you. Because there's a real solid level of trust, consumer trust in farmers in the UK, I think, and in many countries, Canada, I'm a Canadian as well, in Canada, and so they want to believe you, they want to support you, but show us that you've got the story and that you're moving forward. So show them that you're on a journey, and I think they'll be with you. It won't come down to a number. Are you 10 units of carbon or 50 units of carbon? So they want to see that you're trying to improve, and they'll be with you. Sorry.
So I suppose on that, and thinking about it, if you were to be a livestock farmer, what would you be doing to your business in the next 10, 15 years to make it fit for the future?
Well, I'd want to be on that journey, but I'd need help to be on that journey. And I think to a large extent, aren't we trying to do that? I mean, I don't know enough about the detail, but if we look at, say, the dairy industry, Dairy UK or whatever, Dairy England, they know what the issues are. They know that that it's not a level, we often say a level playing field, but if I switched, say, to beef, that that it's unfair, the pressure you're taking about the impact that beef has on the environment, because in fact the system that is used by much of the media doesn't relate to anything that we do in the UK. So it means that again, you've got to be sort of methodical about presenting your case using the best science that you can, understanding though that consumers don't take decisions on the basis of science, that it's much more emotional, and that it's an unfair and it is an uneven world, because those who are antis, the activists who want the world to stop eating meat, for example, they don't want a dialogue, they just want their view imposed, and so they will continue to keep pressing the button, and when they're actually in many cases lying, then actually you've just got to wait. It's very frustrating until they shoot themselves in the foot. But you've got to be. But again, I think there's a reservoir of trust in farmers, and if you show we've got the story here, we know we've got to do something and this is the plan, and we'll report back to you. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I suppose, I've put my AHDB hat on, and I think that's where we've got a big role to play as well, both in understanding the consumers and the drivers, helping understand what that means for the supply chain, but increasingly thinking about what the farm impacts are and providing the tools, products and services for the industry to improve. And I suppose the bit I'm really conscious of that you mentioned is that others around the world are increasing what they do all the time. And yes. So I suppose with that, do you think, I'm conscious that red tape, standards, regulation are always a bugbear of farmers. Do you see that being only heading one way in the kind of next decade?
On health, on the environment, we're just going to get more regulation. It's as simple as that. It's but back to your previous point. If we think we're the greenest, if we think we're the best, I mean, all I know, and I've said this at many a talk, that if I'm talking at to a global audience and say, would all those who consider themselves clean and green please form an orderly line to my left, then there's an unseemly rush, as the the clean and green New Zealanders, apparently are sort of elbowing out the Aussies, who are anyway dry and dusty. But and the Scandinavians are saying, well, no, we're better than, we're near God. There's a great bunch of people who put themselves in that category, and so it's very crowded in the clean and green part of the world, and it will get more crowded.
Okay. So the question we asked in the poll, we asked kind of about what's the biggest question mark facing the industry. The results in from that: tariffs and trade, top with 49%, then going down, shifting consumer demand, then farm policy change, planning in uncertain time, then greater price and market volatility. I guess tariffs and trade is very much about the here and now. So does that surprise you?
No, because it could happen, as you said, like in 3 months' time. Suddenly, bang. The consumer end. I mean, if you look at consumer trends, we do change our diet, but very slowly. And so, as you can see with fresh milk, I mean, it's been sort of cataclysmic in many respects, but it's been over 50 years. It takes a long time for that to happen. And so, for example, this embracing plant-based meats and particularly maybe cell-based meats, and particularly maybe cell-based dairy, it will take a long time, but it will happen. It will happen, and it will happen if not for those who've been kind enough to listen to this webinar, that their children will be into this. And I say, talk to your children, because they know what's happening. They can see it happening right around. I did just going. I was giving a talk the other day for a big American group, and I was actually being filmed instead of just doing it by Zoom. Very American. And so there was a film group of five young men from Manchester. That's when Mancunians could actually move out of Manchester, and they came down to Monmouth to film it. Full film team. And when I finished, I said, how do you think we went? They said, we've got one question. I said, what's that? When are we going to get decent vegan cheese? And I thought, oh, right. I didn't expect that question. And I looked at him and said, well, are you vegetarian or vegan? He said, yeah, we all are. And, it's sort of, sometimes it's like frightening. If you look at that sort of younger generation, there's a slug of people there who they're into this plant-based, and particularly plant-based. Whether they're into cell-based, that's another about. That's another step.
Okay, so look, I'm really conscious of time, and we've exceeded by a couple of minutes. Just look, one final question that came in was, where do you think the UK should focus? Where's its future? Is it around self-sufficiency? Is it about our domestic market? Is it export? Is it exporting in the future? And I think I know what your answer is. So if the answer is the latter, what do we need to do to take advantage of the opportunities more broadly? Right.
Well, we need more of our own market. And if it is 55% self-sufficient, so that's one. I mean, without nailing my flag to the wall about how I voted, I see us continuing with Europe. Why wouldn't we? They're next door. They know us. We've got pretty similar standards, irrespective of whether there's a deal or not. At some stage, they're high income. If we move to other parts of the world in some big export drive, the Asia a long way away, and it's extraordinarily competitive there. As I said, the New Zealanders have been there for decades, ever since we pushed them out of the UK market. That's tough trucking. That doesn't mean that we can't do well there, but I think we're not going to be a major player. It's going to be working out in any market, where can we excel, where can we position ourselves to be the best, and then take advantage of that. I don't think we're not big commodity players in livestock and meat and dairy. We're not. And so it has to be for the higher value. And then there are markets, as we've seen with the organic, with OMSCO, I think, who did a really good fist at actually targeting markets which seem to be very difficult to get into. But if you're sufficiently quick on your feet and you're not commodity orientated, we can survive. Look, the Dutch have been doing it for years with fresh produce.
Yeah, great stuff. So I mean, yeah, do your homework, be targeted, differentiate your product, and don't try and go toe to toe with the low cost producers.
Yeah, you know, it's exactly. This is it's the return to marketing principles. You know, demand pull, not supply push. You know, for goodness sake, and because we'll get our rear ends whipped in international commodity markets, and you know, but there's no reason for us to be there. Why would we be there? We'll get our clocks cleaned. We should just focus on higher value markets that know us, trust us, and will stay with us.
And value us at the end of the day. David, thank you. That's been excellent. And thanks all for joining us this afternoon. If you could complete the feedback form that appear on your screen once the webinar ends, that would be brilliant. We're going to get videos of this session that will be sent to you in the next 24 hours. Slides from today, which David obviously raced through. Huge amount of content within those. They will be available online. If you're left wanting more, you can sign up to receive AHDB's Consumer Insight newsletter. That will land directly in your inbox even regularly. We've also got more detailed sector webinars looking at the COVID impact and how we've adjusted in the coming weeks. Check out ahdb.org.uk/events for that. Thanks again for joining us this afternoon, and many thanks for your time and questions. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you from me too. Thank you.